forum here at 83-year-old Kamuning Bakery Cafe.
Recording in progress.
We have very interesting topics this morning, especially now the Southeast Asian region is the center of world attention. We all know all over the news in the next few days, ASEAN will be hosting an ASEAN summit in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, followed by the G20 leaders meeting of 20 important economies in Bali, Indonesia, then followed by the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, APEC, in Bangkok. Our topic today, the proposed additional 5 more EDCA military bases requested by the United States here all over the Philippines. What implications or impact of this to Philippine security, national security, and to Asian peace? We have invited one of the best intellectuals in Asia today, former Secretary Ricardo Saludo. Later, I will properly introduce a speaker. Then, for opening remarks, we'll invite Mr. Herman Laurel, President of Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies. Then the reactors, later on, Professor Ana Malindog-Uy and Professor Celso Cainglet. Before we go to the speaker for his talk, we'd like to invite Mr. Herman Laurel for a short opening remarks about today's important topic. We have a recording of the entire session. This is right now being shown via Facebook Live, Manila Times Facebook Live, Kamuning Bakery Cafe's Facebook account, also Facebook Live, also GTNR, Global TV News Radio, and also Sensei Think Tank, Center for Strategy, Enterprise, and Intelligence Think Tank, Sensei Facebook page. With all questions, you can text or send via chat box. We'll invite now Mr. Herman Laurel, President of Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Think Tank, also columnist in the Philippine News Agency. Welcome for your opening remarks.
Yeah. Magandang umaga ka Wilson and to Secretary Rick Saludo and to, of course, our colleagues ka Ana Malindog-Uy with her new hairdo and of course Celso Cainglet all the way from Iloilo.
Yes.
Good morning po, and I'll just read very briefly to set the tone of the discussion. First of all, our fellow Asian Century Journal writer Ado Pagdinawan hit the nail on the head when he defined the U.S. objective in the latest spate of evil China propaganda revolving around the new structures on the islands, the reclaimed islands, and that the ulterior motive in this new series of black propaganda is the ramp up to the debate on the renewal of the EDCA in April 2023. Aside from the fact that the U.S. is already proven to be a treacherous ally, stabbing allies in the back the way the EU, for example, particularly Germany, is being destroyed today to force German industries to pack up and relocate to the United States as a corollary effect of the proxy Ukraine war, a record repeated from the Korean and Vietnam wars to Afghanistan. The EDCA is illegal and unconstitutional. Here are the excerpts from the late constitutionalist Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago in the 2015 Senate debates. Quote, voting 15-1-3 senators on Tuesday adopted Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago's resolution expressing the strong sense of the Senate that absent their concurrence, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement is a treaty prohibited under the Constitution. Besides Santiago, those who voted in favor of the resolution were Senators Sonny Angara, Nancy Binay, J.B. Ejercito, Cheese Escudero, T.G. Gingona, Lito Lapid, Loren Legarda, Bongbong Marcos, Serge Osmeña, Coco Pimentel, Grace Poe, Ralph Recto, and Cynthia Villar. The 15th vote came from Senator Pia Cayetano, who was not at the session hall during the vote, but later manifested that she is voting in the affirmative. Plenary approval formalizes Senate Resolution number 1414 as the Senate's position on the question of the validity and effectivity of the EDCA, on which the Supreme Court is allegedly set to decide before U.S. President Barack Obama visits Manila. On the Supreme Court eventual approval of the EDCA, Senator Santiago lumped it with the VFA and saying January 17, 2016, another official report of the Office of Miriam Santiago. Miriam, both EDCA, VFA should be invalid. Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago on Sunday renewed her call for the Philippine government to scrap the visiting forces agreement with the U.S. as she lamented the Supreme Court failed to rise from its problematic 2009 ruling on the VFA by also upholding as constitutional the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Santiago, chair of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, stood by Senate Resolution number 105, which she and 14 other senators adopted in November. The resolution said that without Senate concurrence, any treaty or international agreement, including the EDCA, is invalid. Finally, when the Supreme Court held in 2009 the case of Nicolas versus Romulo, that the VFA is unconstitutional, no less than then Chief Justice Puno dissented, telling his colleagues, quote, "This slur on our sovereignty cannot continue, especially if we are the ones perpetuating it," unquote. Those words resonate today as it did during the time that Senator Miriam Santiago expressed this. These words resonate today with the Supreme Court decision on the EDCA, unquote. End of my message. Back to you, Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herman Mentong Laurel, for reminding us the wisdom of the late Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker, one of the top intellectuals and analysts in Southeast Asia, former Secretary Ricardo Saludo, is strategy advisor and analyst, former cabinet secretary, also former chairman of the Civil Service Commission, and former editor at the famous Asia Week magazine. His background, a short background, he's a very distinguished biodata. I'm summarizing only. He graduated cum laude from Ateneo de Manila University, then went on to study at University of London, then also studied at Said Business School of Oxford University. He also served as adjunct faculty at Ateneo School of Government and also at the Konrad Adenauer Asian Center for Journalism. Now, aside from being a very eloquent and enlightened columnist of the Manila Times newspaper, regularly he comments on geopolitics, politics, and many other issues. He is also the president of Center for Strategy, Enterprise, and Intelligence, Sensei Think Tank. Let us welcome former Secretary Rick Saludo for his talk about this issue. Welcome, Secretary Rick.
Thank you, Wilson, at maraming salamat sa ating mga kasamahan dito sa forum na ito. Very important forum for our nation. It's really a forum that will determine both our geopolitics and our security. Kung mamarapating po ng ating mga kasamahan dito, mag-i-English Tagalog po ako kasi importante po itong maunawaan ng ating mga kababayan na maaaring hindi kasing husay umunawa ng Ingles. Bago ako magpatuloy, before I continue, I'd like to just quickly recap a couple of things on my background. And I say this not to, give to boost myself, but to really to project where I'm coming from. My studies at the University of London were for a Master of Science in Public Policy and Management. So I did study government. Ang ating pong na pinag-aralan sa Oxford is a postgraduate diploma on strategy and innovation. And I may also add, bahagi po rin ng ating trabaho at pag-aaral. I am a graduate and also a speaker at the Enterprise Risk Management Academy of Singapore. Kaya sinusubaybayan po natin ang mga panganib o mga risk. Kaya ang ating pong background ay strategy, risk, and government, no?
And
of course,
geopolitics expert.
and geopolitics. So ito po ang at sa geopolitics po 17 taon po tayo sa Asia Week magazine sa Hong Kong at yung pong karanasang yun at kaalaman ng ating dinadala rin dito. If I may share my screen.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I did not prepare a PowerPoint. Instead, I'm going to bring you to a number of websites because I'd like you to actually see what the actual reports of other people rather than me distilling all of these things by myself, no? So ito po ang una kong slide. Philippines-US relations, legacy of shared sacrifices. Ngayon po, binanggit ko ito at ito ay tungkol sa kamakalawa lang ito. This is about the statement. Pahayag po ito ng bagong embahador ng Amerika sa atin, Ambassador Mary Kay Carlson, at binibigyan pansin niya rito ang sama-samang pagsasakripisyo at pagtatanggol sa ating bansa ng Amerika at Pilipinas, no? Ang mga Pilipino at mga Amerikano. So shared sacrifices. And I note this because this is probably a very strong sentiment among our people when it comes to our security relationship with America. They liberated us in World War II. And so our sentiments are very strong for America. Malakas po ang ating pagtingala at pagtangi sa Amerika dahil nga kasama-sama tayong lumaban noong ikalawang digmaang pandaigdig. But we have to start looking at things with a realistic view. Ano ba talaga, hindi lampas sa mga damdamin, ano ang maaring ibunga sa ating bansa nitong relasyon natin sa Amerika? And for this one, I will quote no less than the President's father. President Marcos, this is from a study, The Foreign Policy of Ferdinand Marcos. Ito po ay isang report, isang pag-aaral sa Inglaterra, sa England, no? Sa isang university doon. At ano ang sinabi rito? Ferdinand Marcos said, in international affairs, we shall be guided by the national interest and the conscience of our society. Binibigyan pansin dito na ating Pangulo, dapat iisipin natin, hindi lang na meron tayong mga malalapit na kaibigan, kundi ang ating pangangailangan bilang bansa. At ano ang inihayag niya lalong-lalo na ito, State of the Nation Address, 1972. The Philippines, in recognition of its national interest and response to inevitable pressures of new world developments, must make a precise account of its interests in the changing world environment. So, doon pa lang, 1972 pa, hinahangad na ng ating Pangulo ng panahong yon at doon January 1972, wala pang martial law, na dapat ang Pilipinas isa-isip na kung ano ang makabubuti sa atin sa gitna ng nagbabagong kaayusan sa mundo. And this was the time, you will recall, that China was starting to reach out to the world, and in fact, the Philippines became one of the first countries to forge diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China. Ngayon, isa ring binigyang pansin dito ng ating Pangulo, our President, made specific focus on our relationship with America, and this is what he said, no? To be a realist is to accept the fact that it is to serve her own interests and to safeguard her security as a nation. And her there is talking about the United States. Her security as a nation, her position as a world leader, and only incidentally for our protection that America has built up her imposing military and diplomatic establishments in our country. Sabi po ng ating Pangulo, ang pangunahing pakay ng Amerika sa pagtatayo ng mga militar na base at iba pang mga armas dito sa ating bansa at sa Asia na rin, ay ang sarili niyang katayuan sa mundo, sarili niyang kasiguridad. And so we must look at our relationship with America in the same light. These are done not because America wants to be nice to us, but because it serves their national interest. And I will further note that our president particularly gave attention to the nationalist ideas of Claro M. Recto, the great Filipino nationalist, highlighting special relations with the United States, solidarity with Asian states. Bago-bago pa lang noon ang ASEAN, pero gusto na ating Pangulong Marcos noon, lumapit tayo sa mga kapwa bansa sa Asia. The need for self-reliance, number 4, hindi dapat umaasa sa ibang mga bansa. At number 3, very important for our discussion today, the US bases as magnet for attacks. Sinasabi ng Pangulo, itong mga base militar na ito ay maaring makaakit ng atake sa ating bansa. And he in fact said that directly. Okay? He said that directly. This is a call, well, I'm having problems calling up this page, but I think I'll have to call up the actual article. Okay. Okay, here we are. Actually, the page is already on the screen. Thanks. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Here is the page. This is what he said in 1975, and this was quoted by the late Jose Romero, who was an economist and a former diplomat. If the purpose of American military bases is to strengthen American military posture in the Pacific, or in the Indian Ocean and throughout the world, does this not expose the Philippines to the animosity, suspicions, and conflicts arising out of this American military buildup? Animosities and conflicts that we have no participation in making, and which do not these bases endanger the safety of Filipinos in the Philippines, not only from conventional armed attack, but also from nuclear attack. So noong pa man, 1975, nangangamba na ang ating Pangulo na ang Pilipinas ay baka madamay po dito sa digma sa ating bansa, sa Asia, no? So we'll need to move to let's move on to the rest of this presentation. And I only have 15 minutes, so I don't really have that much time. Okay. Tuloy po tayo ngayon. So what is the situation right now? Well, these bases, based on the discussion of reports on media recently, is that the Philippines will be increasing the current 5 bases into 10. Saan po ba yung mga 5 base na yan? Well, they're in Cebu, Puerto Princesa, and Cagayan de Oro. Tapos merong 2 sa Pampanga at saka Nueva Ecija, no? And if the late President Marcos is correct, that these are all potential targets of attack. And now, according to a senior defense official who was not named, but met with Filipino journalists in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon, this will be increased by 5. Dadagdagan pa po ng 5. So we will have, 10 potential targets in our country. No? So ito po ang ipinangangamba natin. No? Ngayon, ano ba ang panganib sa atin dito sa mga pangyayaring ito? Well, here is a report that people should look at. It's called War with China, Thinking Through the Unthinkable. Lumabas po ito 2016, kauupo pa lang ni President Duterte, and I remember writing a column saying, this is the war report President Duterte should read. Dahil po dito, sinasabi kung anong maaring mangyari sa mga base na ginagamit ng Amerika dito sa ating bansa. And what does it say? What does this report say? Well, it says that if there is a war, ito po ang mga tatamaan. US losses of surface and naval forces, disabled aircraft carriers, and regional air bases could be significantly damaged. Yun po ang sabi ng sariling report ng Amerika. Ang sinasabi po nila, ang mga barkong nagdadala ng eroplano at ang mga base militar na ginagamit ng Amerika sa Asia, regional air bases, tatamaan po ito. So the Americans do expect that if there is a war, these bases will be hit. Now there's a more recent study, no? Actually it's war games, no? Ito po ay war games na ginawa ng Center for New American Security, no? At ano po ang sabi dito sa war games na ito? Well, no, sinabi nila kung magkakagera sa Taiwan, the battle for Taiwan, no? I will move to a particular spot in the around 7 minutes into the show, no? They plotted what would be, you know, the war, how the war will go, no? Okay. And dito sa kanilang sa kanila pong pag-aaral, sa kanilang pagsusuri, ay ang atin pong ang mga puwersa na maaaring gamitin laban sa China ay maaaring manggaling sa Pilipinas. Look at this, no? So it is these forces that are pointed in the arrow, well, they're coming from, guess what? The Philippines. So sa mga senaryo po ng Amerika sa kanilang war games, ang kanilang plano ay magkakaroon ng atake sa isang digma lamang sa Taiwan, manggagaling sa ating bansa. Ngayon, ano ang magiging resulta nito? Hindi na siguro natin kailangan pag-usapan masyado. Ang magiging resulta nito, kung ito po ay mangyayari, kung tayo aatakihin din tayo, ayan po, maliwanag. Nasa war games po nila yan. No? In their war games, they expect that we will be attacked. No? So, alam na po ng Amerika na ito ang mangyayari sa Pilipinas. No? At gusto ngayon nila, hindi lang 5 base ang gagamitin sa ating bansa, gagawing 10 ang base na gagamitin sa ating bansa. Ngayon, hindi pa naman ito awa ng Diyos, hindi pa confirm ng ating gobyerno. Ang nagsabi dito, ewan ko lang kung saan niya nakuha to, ay isang quote-unquote unnamed senior defense o Pentagon official ng Amerika. Ang lakas ng laman ng loob niya. Ang lakas ng loob na magsabi na gano'n, maliban kung ito ay napagkasunduan na ng ating DFA at saka Department of National Defense. Kung nagkasundo na sila ng gano'n, di yung taong yun sa Pentagon, nagsasabi ng totoo. No? Okay? Ngayon, ito ang ating ipinangangamba. No? At ang sinusunod na slide na ipapakita ko sa inyo, ito ay isang patuloy na pag-aaral base dun sa war with China. Matapos nilang pag-aralan yung war with China, kung ano nangyari ron, over the next 5 years, ang kanilang conclusion po, ang kanilang naging pananaw, masyadong lumakas, lalo pang lumakas ang China na tuloy, mas mabuti pa sa Amerika according to this parang recap o pagbabalik dun sa report na yon ng war with China. Ang gusto nilang gawin, mas mabuti pa na magkaroon ng maayos na pagsasamahan ang China at Amerika. At wala talaga ito, suportado natin ito. We recommend therefore that the United States move sooner rather than later before its position in the region diminishes further to constructively engage China across a range of flashpoints. Yan po ang rekomendasyon ng RAND Corporation. dahil lumalakas ang China, imbes na magplano kang makipagdigma, kausapin mo na ng ayos para wala nang digma. So, tama po yan. Magandang rekomendasyon po yan mula dun sa mga eksperto sa depensa sa RAND Corporation. Pero mukhang hindi yun ang pakinig ng ating sa Amerika, ano? Kasi ang kanila pong national security strategy nakalalabas lang, no? This is a national security October 92 galing sa White House, no? Ano ang kanilang number one global priority? This is a table of contents to. Basahin niyo yung what is their number one priority? If they're supposed to engage China in friendly relations, well, their number one priority, according to their national security, is outcompeting China and constraining Russia. Parang dito, hindi yata ito pakikipagkaibigan, pakikipagkompetensya to. And of course, if we carry American bases, well, of course, we become part of this competition. I just like to check how many minutes do I still have. Ayoko nang mag-overtime.
Pwedeng flexible, Secretary.
Okay.
You can be flexible.
So this is what we're looking at. I mean, the RAND Corporation is saying you must engage China constructively. What is the White House plan? Here you have it in their national security, outcompeting China and constraining Russia. If we have American bases here, if we are tied up with America because of our mutual defense treaty to attack the enemies of America, well then this is in effect the foreign policy that we will be adopting to help America outcompete China and constrain Russia. This is, of course, problematic. Ngayon, ano po ang mismong plano ng Amerika dito sa Asia, no? Well, of course they want to make use of these bases to put in their forces, no? And sa kanila, sa kitang-kita naman nila doon sa mga pag-aaral na ang malaking puwersa nila malayo sa Asia, no? 50% of their naval assets are in Hawaii, no? Ngayon meron din nasa Guam, at ang gusto nila doon sa kanilang pivot to Asia, they want to bring most of these forces to East Asia. 60% under the pivot to Asia, no? But they have since gone even further than that, no? Ito po ang kanilang plano ngayon. Kalalabas lang po nito. This is part of their plan. Or actually, March last year, pero ito na ang ibig nila ipatupad, to build an anti-China missile network along the first island chain. Ano po yung first island chain? Ito yung mga isla, mga archipelago na nakapalibot sa China. Kasama po dyan ang bansang Hapon, ang ating bansa, Pilipinas, at ang bahagi ng Indonesia, no, at Malaysia. Doon yung mga isla naroon. Kasi ito, sa strategiya ng Amerika, ito ang paraan upang ang mga hukbong pandagat ng China ay mapigil sa paglabas. So the US wants to build an anti-China defense system. And this is backed up by a big amount of money. The US last year proposed a Pacific Deterrence Initiative. They have a similar one for Europe called the European Strategic Defense Initiative. At ito po ay may budget na ipinasok sa kasalukuyang Kongreso na mga $27 billion na gagastusin sa loob ng 7 taon, no? So 6 na taon. So this is the strategy now of America in the Pacific to build missile forces, no? And bakit ganon? Kasi kung panay eroplano lang, kung masira yung mga air bases, mahirap hindi kasing epektibo. Pero if you put ground-based intermediate range missiles, okay? Pag yan, marami yan at saka hindi mo basta-basta malilipol kasi kalat-kalat yan. No? So halimbawa kung maglagay sila sa ating bansa, ikakalat nila sa buong bansa. Mahirap ngayon na ubusin lahat yan ng kalaban nila. Ngayon, ang kasamang palad, kung kalat yan sa buong ating bansa, marami tayong mapipinsala kung ito ay atakihin. Now, what is the current state of this program? Well, they are now negotiating with allies to see if they can introduce this ground-based. And this is a study by the RAND Corporation commissioned by the US Air Force para malaman kung itong mga missile na ito na gusto nilang ilagay sa Asia ay tatanggapin ng kanilang mga kaalyadong bansa. And what is the conclusion? Well, according to the report, no, none of the 5 allies that they approached, none of the 5 allies that they approached will agree. Nung panahong ito, this was around 2020, no? Ayaw ng Thailand, hindi papayag ang Australia, hindi papayag ang Japan, hindi papayag ang South Korea, at noong panahong yon sa ilalim ni Pangulong Duterte, hindi rin papayag ang Pilipinas. Kaya itong mga missile na gusto na ikalat sa buong Asia, walang tatanggap nito. Kaya lang, ang diferensya, nagbago na po ang gobyerno sa Pilipinas. Nagbago na po ang pamunuan. Kaya baka subukin naman uli ng Amerika na mailagay itong mga missile na ito sa ating bansa. Ayan po maliwanag na plano ng Amerika. No? Ngayon, ang laging sinasabi sa atin, ito ibig ko nang patapos na siguro tayo, laging sinasabi na ang ating bansa ay kailangan, well, before I do that, let me note, no? This report. Okay. Now, where are we in this brewing war situation with Taiwan? Well, here is a report by an esteemed professor and journalist, Richard Javad Hedarian, very distinguished watcher of geopolitical affairs. At ito kasusulat lang niya to October 3. At sa kanyang pag-uulat, US Philippines drawing closer on defense of Taiwan. So tayo po at ang Amerika ay, ayon dito sa ulat na ito, ay nagkakalapit na para sa depensa ng Taiwan. Ibig pong sabihin, sa pagkaintindi ko po rito, kung magkakagera sa Taiwan, damay po tayo. Damay po tayo. No? Now, will the US get involved in a Taiwan war? Well, ito po ang sabi ni Pangulong Biden. Kung magkaroon ng invasion of Taiwan, kalahok ang Amerika. Ngayon, ito po ayon sa nagprotesta dito ang China kasi pag binabago daw nito ang patakaran o policy ng Amerika tungkol sa Taiwan. Bakit? Kasi dun sa Taiwan Relations Act of 1979, sinabi doon ng Amerika na tutulungan nila ang Taiwan para maidepensa ang sarili, pero wala doong commitment na idedepensa ng Amerika ang Taiwan. Dito, ilang beses nang sinabi ni Biden, 2 beses noong 1 taon, at ito bago na naman, na kung magkaka-invasion ng Taiwan, dedepensahan ng Amerika. No? Ngayon, pag nagkaroon ng ganyang depensa, pag meron silang puwersa sa Pilipinas, kalahok tayo. At yun nga yung nakita natin kanina doon sa war games na pinakita ko sa TV. No? Okay, so this is the situation that we are facing. And I think we just have to ask ourselves, is it really advantageous for the Philippines to have this relationship with the US where they will have troops here, and now they are moving towards 10 bases that they will use in our country? Ang aking kung pananaw dyan, hindi na tayo dapat umasa sa Amerika. No? At meron namang paraan para unti-unti makahiwalay tayo sa Amerika. No? And I'm having okay. There is, I've outlined this in an article, which if people haven't read it, I suggest you read it. It's called Defending the Philippines Without Uncle Sam. And it has a 3-point agenda. First, we have to reduce the threat. Alam nyo, sa gera, pinakamabuti na walang gera. Kaya kung merong mga sigalot na maaaring pagmula ng gera, ayusin mo na yon. Now, the first thing we must do with regard to China, is apart from addressing peacefully our issues in the South China Sea, ang isa pa ring dapat siguruhin natin na hindi tayo magiging source o pagmumula ng atake sa China. That would be the biggest issue with China if we allow forces in our country to attack China. Now, if you want to see a clear idea of what something like this would do, look at Ukraine. Ukraine said it would join NATO. Therefore, NATO forces would move into Ukraine. It also said that they will double their armed forces in 3 years with NATO help. Ano nangyari? I mean, if a major nation is faced with a major military escalation next door, it could be provocative. No? So we have to first reduce the threat. The next thing, we have to enhance what are called A2AD, anti-access, area denial, weaponry, and facilities. At ito po ay iminungkahi na nung pang 2012 sa kalagitnaan nung paggigirian sa Scarborough Shoal, minungkahi ito ng isang defense think tank sa Amerika, yung Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments. Ano po itong think tank na to? Ito po ang nagpaplano ng mga defense development and acquisitions ng Amerika. No? So this is very expert when it comes to building up armaments. And what is their recommendation for the Philippines? Ito po yung report nila, the Geostrategic Return of the Philippines, April 2012. At ang kanilang mungkahi, no, sa Amerika, yun na nga, build up anti-access, area denial, military capabilities. Okay? Yun. So ang kailangan dito, ano ang mungkahi sa Pilipinas, no? That we should develop ito. Emphasis should be providing defensive systems like maritime surveillance aircraft, coastal anti-ship defenses, and air defense system. Ito ang kailangan ng Pilipinas. If we have these 3 things, the planes to watch our waters and for any intruders, anti-ship missiles to take out even large battleships, and air defense systems to protect mainly to protect the missiles, to protect the anti-ship defenses so that they cannot be taken out. Kung meron tayo nito, ayon sa CSBA, maidedepensa natin ang ating sarili. Ngayon, ano po nangyari? Hindi po ito pinansin ng Amerika. Hindi po ito pinansin. At siguro mahuhulaan nyo na kung bakit. Kasi pag meron tayo nito, baka hindi na natin sila payagang magbase sa Pilipinas. But this is the very recommendation of the CSBA, which is a top Washington think tank. Nang isa pa rin hong nagmungkahi nito, lalo pa nung anti-ship missiles, ay ang ating yumaong dating National Security Advisor at Parañaque Congressman, si Roy Logoles. At tandaan po natin, si Roy Goles, kasama ko po yan sa gabinete, under President Arroyo, no, National Security Advisor siya noon. Roy Goles is a graduate of the US Naval Academy. Hindi po West Point, Annapolis. Yun po ang nagtuturo ng naval strategy. Doon po siya nagtapos, no? At anong kanyang mungkahi? He wanted the Philippines, ilang beses po namin ito napag-usapan. He wanted the Philippines to buy 200 missiles, yung tinatawag na BrahMos missile. And I will show you what that missile is like. Here it is, no? The BrahMos missile is an anti-ship missile that has 300 to 400 kilometers range. Yan pong range na yan ng missile. Supersonic po ito. Walang barko na makakatakas dito. The 300 to 400 kilometer range will cover our entire exclusive economic zone. Yung buong zone na yan na ating may mga intruders kung minsan this missile can cover it. Ngayon, awa ng Diyos, in December 2019, naibulong po sa akin ni Secretary Lorenzano noong panahong yon, na ang Pilipinas ay pinag-aaralan na ito. Bago nun, walang ayaw nilang, parang hindi pinapansin ito. And what I can only surmise is that when India joined the quadrilateral alliance of the United States, Japan, and Australia, nung pumasok yung India dito sa Quad Alliance, hindi na pwedeng pahindian ng Amerika itong missile na ito. So the Philippines was able to buy 3 batteries of these missiles. I think it's just the start. It will cost $374 million. No? Roy Goles wanted 200 of these. If you have 200 of these, nobody can touch you. I mean, pagpasok nila dyan, lubog sila. No? And we will be what I call a porcupine nation. If you touch us, you bleed. So ito pong kailangan para madepensahan po natin ang sarili natin. Ngayon, kailangan din natin ng mga kaalyadong bansa. Hindi ko sinasabing wala tayong kaalyadong bansa. Pero itong mga kaalyadong bansa, pwede rin silang kuminsan maglagay dito ng mga eroplano, ganyan, okay lang yon. Ang diferensya lang, mahirap magkaroon ng kaalyadong bansa na may armas nuklear. Just remember that. It would be highly risky to bring into our country nuclear weapons. And the United States it is their policy never to confirm or deny if any of their ships, planes, and submarines going into our country are carrying nuclear weapons. So if we allow US forces into our country, China will have to assume that some of them are carrying nuclear weapons. And of course, that will they will take necessary steps to counter that. You know, back in 1962, Russia wanted to put nuclear missiles in Cuba, and it nearly drove the world to World War III. Eventually, the Russians withdrew the missiles, and the Americans pulled out the nuclear missiles that they put in Turkey. Kala ng mundo noon, yung Russia gusto lang maglagay ng missile sa Cuba. Ang totoo, naglagay na ng missile sa Turkey ang Amerika. Kaya napilitan ng Russia na maglagay sa Cuba. Ang pinagkatapusan, binawi nila yung mga missiles. Well, we shouldn't get even into that game. We should not allow forces that may bring nuclear armaments into our country. We should never allow it. And by the way, that is what the Constitution requires. Our Constitution bans nuclear weapons in our country. Ako po I think I can stop now. I would like to give my reactors time as well to react. Marami pong salamat sa inyong pakikinig. I will send all the website addresses. I'll post them in the chat while I'm listening. Later lalagay ko sa chat para yung mga gustong tumingin dito sa mga material na ito pwedeng pumunta ron. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Thank you very much, Wilson. And I turn the floor over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, former Secretary Rick Saludo. Kagabi binasa ko lahat ulit yung mga column ninyo. But still, I learned a lot ngayon. Akala ko alam ko na lahat ng mga gandang ideas ni Secretary Saludo. Crash course ito sa geopolitics and current events sa Asia ngayon. Nakakabahala, thought-provoking, eye-opener. Thank you. Well, next, I will invite the 2 others to react and to give their opinions on this issue. And then, we'll open the floor for questions. Pwede magtanong yung mga media friends natin and others watching. To remind our speakers, we also are in Facebook Live. Manila Times, Kamuning Bakery Cafe, and Field Bricks and others. Next, I'd like to invite Professor Ana Malindog-Uy, also a very distinguished intellectual analyst, similar to our speaker, Secretary Saludo. She also graduated cum laude from the other school naman, kapitbahay ng Ateneo sa UP, and expert in studying geopolitics and politics. She is the Vice President for External Affairs of the Philippines Asian Century Strategic Studies think tank. Professor Ana Malindog-Uy, welcome. Pwedeng Taglish, English, and then a few Tagalog lines. Maganda ginawa ni Secretary Saludo. This is recorded and we will share it also. Kaya maganda if we have bilingual once in a while.
Yes.
Welcome. Paki-unmute. Kamusta internet ni Miss Ana Malindog-Uy? May problema ba sa internet ni Miss Ana? Kamusta internet ni Professor Ana Malindog-Uy? Kamusta yung internet niya? Mahina daw internet niya. Professor Ana. The second reactor daw muna. Inaayos siya internet niya. We'd like to first invite Professor Celso Cainglet, also an analyst. He is now professor at University of the Philippines, Visayas. He is now in Iloilo, in Central Philippines. Welcome, Professor Celso Cainglet. Also a very distinguished intellectual, Europe educated, and also analyst of geopolitics and politics, plus philosophy and other fields. Welcome,
Okay.
Professor Cainglet.
Okay, sige.
Magandang umaga ka, Wilson. Gusto ko yung background mo. Ang ganda.
Good morning. Yes.
Ganda.
Pwedeng English for our
Yes,
foreign
yes.
Media, and then a few Tagalog lines if you wish. Thank you.
Like you, I learned a lot from my very eloquent former boss, Rick Saludo.
Kaya pala, he said he's your friend.
Yeah, he's
You
my
used to be
boss sa
together pala.
Center for Enterprise and Intelligence, you know? Galing
He has
talaga.
a high regard for you, Professor Cainglet.
Thank you. The feeling is mutual. Anyway, I may just have 3 points, you know.
Yes.
You know what? One of the reasons why we never developed our Navy, we are an archipelagic country, we're supposed to have a very strong Navy, is because of the presence of the US bases. The Americans told us, never mind developing your Navy, andito naman kami to help you in case of war. But way back in the 60s, we almost went to war with Malaysia over the what they call this, the Sabah dispute. And the Americans categorically denied assistance, you know. What I'm saying, you cannot trust the Americans. You cannot rely on the Americans. No? And yung BrahMos kasi, ano yan missile na yan, US yan. At kontrolado ng satellite nila yan. Kahit bumili tayo yan, pag disable nila, hindi rin natin magagamit yan. There is a more effective counterpart, yung silkworm missile ng China, mas mura, mas effective, no? Supersonic din. So we have to choose between BrahMos and silkworm. And of course, if silkworm is an anti-ship missile, pero syempre, pag bumili tayo sa China yan, it would cause raffle within the United States. No? Second point, katatapos lang yung midterm elections yes, and I think the Republican won the majority seats, I think only by 2 seats, no, if I'm not wrong. No?
Yes.
And we know that the Republicans are notorious, call this intervenors, pakialameros sa affair ng ibang bansa, no? Then the Republican government always look outward. Parang ang basa ko dito, matutuloy yung 5 bases na yan reading the present administration also, no? Seems to be gravitating towards the Americans. Siguro takot silang bakuna naman at matanggal, kaya medyo doon sila, no? And of course, with the present DFA secretary, no? Basahin mo yung mga pronouncement niya, no? Tapos recently, minonitor ko rin yung mga interview ng mga amboy sa YouTube, tulad din na this guy, si Jose Antonio Custodio, no, na masayang-masaya siya na wala na si Duterte kasi na-delay daw yung expansion ng EDCA, and he was backed up by Greg Polling. So doon talaga ang direksyon. No? So ang pangatlo kong punto, this is a political move. Ang pangatlo kong punto, para hoping na matigil ito, is to bring the concern, to raise the awareness of enlightened Americans themselves. Kasi alam mo, down ang economy ng Amerika, pababa eh. Simula nung 2020, it fell by 8.9%, then the slope continues to slide down. It should be the Americans themselves, enlightened Americans, who should pressure their government to stop military spending abroad and concentrate the money in their domestic problem. Dami nila problema sa healthcare, ekonomiya, daming homeless. So, sa tingin ko, may mga Pilipino ring gising, ano? Pero kukunti lang, pwede ring i-pressure yung gobyerno natin. Pero ang tingin ko mas epektibong strategiya ay yung mga Amerikano mismo ang mag-pressure sa gobyerno nila to stop military spending. No? Sila mismo, i-pressure nilang congressman nila, senador nila, itigil ito at gamitin yung pera for domestic concerns. Yun lang po.
Thank you. Ang galing na mga points ni Professor Celso Cainglet. Ang galing kayo mag-analyze. Kaya pala hanga si Secretary Saludo nung tinext ko yung pangalan nyo. Sabi niya magaling yan si Professor Cainglet. Kilala pala kayo.
Siyempre, idol ko yan eh. Madala ako sa kanya. Bus ko yan eh.
Yes. Thank you, thank you. He has a very high regard for you. Next, thank you, Professor Cainglet. Later on, we have media to ask questions to our speakers. Thank you, Professor Celso Cainglet in Iloilo right now. Next, we'd like to invite Professor Ana Malindog-Uy. I hope your internet is okay now.
I think so.
Yeah,
Can
you're
you hear
very
me?
good.
Yeah.
You are very clear.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Exciting mga sinasabi ng mga speakers natin. I'm learning a lot.
Okay, thank you so much, Wilson. To my co-panel of speakers for this media forum, Secretary Rick Saludo and Professor Cainglet, and to our media friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant morning to all. Probably on my side, I will touch more on the foreign policy, and it's much more, I'm trying to analyze how the world is evolving at this time. So if you look at the world at the moment, it's changing and evolving. There's a change in the global order from a unipolar to a multipolar world, and it's fast approaching and forthcoming. The unipolar world that was predominantly and challenged, led by the United States for several decades, is becoming a thing of the past every passing day. The rise of new centers of power, particularly the BRICS countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the decline of US unipolarity foster a return to a multipolar international system. Given this kind of changes, yung mga nangyayari sa mundo, as a middle power and its foreign policy, the Philippines has to adjust to this emerging multipolar world to meet head-on both the opportunities and challenges brought by the impending shift in the global order. In as far as this is concerned, the independent foreign policy set forth by former President Rodrigo Duterte and actually embraced by the incumbent President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos is thus far, from my vantage point, the most pragmatic course of action, given the evolving geopolitical dynamics and realities the country is confronted with. In similar terms to the previous administration, the independent foreign policy of the new administration should be, from the way I see it, should be characterized by pragmatism and should be based on the backdrop that the country is a friend to all and an enemy to none. This means the Philippines engages with all major powers, particularly the US and China, while maintaining close cooperative and friendly relations with countries in the Asia-Pacific region and the rest of the world, while prioritizing the country's supreme national interest above all else. So ibig sabihin, bigyan natin ng focus at priority at bigyan natin ng tuon ng ating national interest above any other interest at all of other countries. Without a doubt, the Philippines must pursue a genuine and authentic independent foreign policy in every sense, which would mean complete neutrality and positioning itself as non-aligned. This could be done by downgrading or abrogating the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA, Visiting Forces Agreement, and the Mutual Defense Treaty with the United States. This means rejecting outright alignment with the US and not giving into the lobby of the US to install and establish 5 more EDCA, US military bases in the country, which is, for me, the way I analyze it, is analogous to militarizing the Philippines. To note, currently the country, as mentioned earlier by Secretary Saludo, is hosting US military facilities or bases and soldiers because of EDCA and BFA. But take note, this is a very important. The Philippines has no control over this EDCA or US military bases. Even the Philippine president, if I am not mistaken, is not allowed to inspect US military facilities. At the moment, there are as mentioned earlier, there are 5 EDCA bases located all across the Philippines, which are, for many reasons, it's actually located for US purposes. And also, of course, to challenge Beijing. These are very near the South China Sea area, no? Now, if these EDCA bases are further open to US military assets and forces, if an additional 5 more EDCA or US military bases will be installed in the country by the Americans, the Philippines, since it is situated in a very strategic position, geopolitically speaking, in the Asia-Pacific region, may end up as a cannon fodder of America if military confrontation breaks out in the region between superpowers. If this happens, the national survival and security of the country will be undermined and compromised. Worse, these EDCA military bases, as mentioned again earlier by Secretary Saludo, will become prime targets for retaliation or attacks because of US military assets and the presence of boots on the ground. I guess as a country, no, bilang isang bansa, we don't want na we have a repeat of history, particularly what happened during World War II. To note, the country was invaded by Japan not because it was at war with Japan. The country was invaded by Japan precisely because it was a home to the largest US military installation outside America. Consequently, the Philippines became a battleground of the war between Japan and the US. Hence, as a nation, we should learn from our own experience and our own history, and probably we should not repeat the mistakes of the past. Thus, the possibility that the Philippines will further open its military facilities to the US and possibly install 5 more EDCA US military bases in the country is very, very bothersome and worrisome at the same time. Opening the country's military facilities to the United States and allowing 5 more EDCA bases for whatever reason is a dangerous game and a path that the Philippines and its leaders must contemplate seriously. If in any case this happens, the country practically becomes the unfortunate US strategic security and defense outpost and the launchpad of the US security and military operations in the Indo-Pacific region. As earlier, it was actually demonstrated in the war games by Secretary Saludo. This is not a good thing, I think, for the country. This is worrisome, especially if a war or military confrontation in the Asia-Pacific or Indo-Pacific region breaks out, involving the US. Thus, the new administration under the leadership of President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. must assess and look into these matters with much prudence and reservation. Likewise, the current administration must consider that the 1987 Constitution prohibits the existence of foreign military bases and troops in the Philippine territory. Moreover, as Filipinos, no, as a nation, no, we should also reflect probably and if the Philippines still need a military treaty with the United States. The original rationale behind the crafting of the MDT or the Mutual Defense Treaty, the mother treaty of EDCA and the BFA, were to guard against a rearmed Japan after World War II, with the Soviet Union as the convenient secondary threat because of the Cold War. But such threats are gone now. In a way, we have to ask the question if we need the MDT still, or we need to revisit it and probably review and see, no? Because if you look at the MDT, EDCA, and BFA, there's a lot of infirmities and lopsided and skewed provision favorable more to the US than to the Philippines that need to be revisited and reassessed. Before probably discussing another 5 more EDCA bases in the country, probably the best thing forward is the best course of action for our government is to reconsider, review, and reassess the merits and demerits of this U.S. military agreements between the two countries, Philippines and the United States. So in retrospect, as a country, we should have a firm resolve and tenacity to deviate from the colonial mentality of being subservient to the United States, veering away from being used as a pawn in the U.S. hardline policy and posture against China, which if not tempered and moderated, would lead to a horrendous misadventure and tragedy, not only for the Philippines, but for the whole world. Furthermore, it is high time for the Philippines to take hold of its fate and destiny as a country rather than relying on other countries for its development, progress, and even security survival amid the geopolitical tensions and realities affecting the Indo-Pacific region and the world at large. The Philippines can relate with other countries and the entire international community based on mutual trust, understanding, confidence, and equal footing. To do that, the Philippines must pursue a meaningful independent foreign policy that upholds and prioritizes its supreme national interest. It must stand not subservient to the will and caprices of any superpower. Regionally, the Philippines should continue to assert ASEAN centrality, which means unity and solidarity with neighboring countries in Southeast Asia. It should continue to forge good relations with the rest of Asian countries, and it should continue to pursue good relations with major powers like China and the United States, and with middle powers like Russia, Japan, Brazil, India, EU, South Africa, Australia, and many other middle powers in the world. The Philippines should continue to exercise multilateralism and diplomacy as its primary weapons in international relations, while strengthening its deterrence capacity, relying on its own strength and capability as much as possible. Indeed, it is high time for the Philippines and the Filipino people to craft their path and course of action advantageous to themselves with dignity and a sense of pride as a country and as a people. I believe this is the way forward for our country, our beloved country, the Philippines. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening and paying attention. Have a pleasant morning to all, and we'll try to answer your questions as much as we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ana Malindog-Uy and Professor Celso Cainglet, for your reactions. Some others are texting me. If you could email down your reaction statement kung mayroon kayo, email or e-message. And of course, yes. And of course, sinabi ni Secretary Rick Saluda kanina, very, very enlightening and eye-opener for somebody who thinks, I thought I already knew everything about this topic. I read Secretary Saludo, kagabi, even before sleeping, I read again all your columns one by one on this topic, plus other topics also na ako din ako nakatulog, natutuwa ako kasi ang dami ako natututo kay Secretary Saludo and the others. But today's 3 speakers are very enlightening. There are questions here from different people. I'll start with may sinabi si Secretary Saludo earlier na the EDCA bases would be a magnet for possible attack by countries that are in conflict with the US or strategic rivalry with the US. 2-3 weeks ago, a Vietnamese official came to Pandesal Forum to speak, and he precisely, as Secretary Saludo said, that baka I could, somebody asked, was it true that he said the American bases in the Philippines were used to bomb the 3 countries of Indo-China, which is Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia during the 60s and 70s, he said. But at that time, Vietnam had no military capabilities yet to strike back, unlike China now and even North Korea. Can you comment on that now? North Korea is also a possible target of US conflict. And we might be also, you are more expert in this. Do they have the capabilities to strike back North Korea? I think they're spending so much money in developing their own arms. Two journalists texted those questions to Secretary Saludo and the other two speakers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Before I reply to the questions, let me call your attention to certain. I've been posting in the in our
chat
chat
box. Yes.
the links to particular articles which may be of interest to the group. No, so
Yes.
Going back to that question, certainly U.S. bases in the Philippines were used in the Vietnam War, and I will even add that during the first Gulf War in 1991.
Yes.
Well, the U.S. bases were still here, and they were used during that war.
Wow.
Not to mount attacks all the way there, but the facilities became a place where they would gather more material that would then be transported onto the Middle East. So if they have bases here, they'll use it for whatever they want. We cannot tell them,
Yes.
oh, you can't use it for this or that. No, that's not the way it works. They will use it as they see fit. No. Now, with regard to threats to our country, certainly adversaries of the United States are stronger now. China, of course, but also North Korea. And if you will recall, back in 2017, North Korea and the United States and South Korea had very intense tensions. No, and North Korea then threatened Guam. Remember, they were threatening to send a missile to Guam. Well, if the missile can hit Guam, it can hit the Philippines because and in fact, if we probably had EDCA already implemented during that time, and we actually identified 5 bases in the country that would be used by American forces, North Korea might have threatened us, might have included us among the bases that would be hit. No, so definitely, I mean, that's the first thing we said, quoting the late President Marcos. These bases are magnets for attack. No, they are magnets for attack.
Is Vladivostok of Russia also another strategic rival? Russia is still in conflict with the US now.
Well, certainly, if there was any involvement of the Russian Asian Pacific forces in a war with the United States, then and we had bases, then it would involve us. Thankfully now we don't have the bases yet. At least it's not fully implemented, and I don't think Russia is keen to really mobilize its Asian military for any action here. They're too tied up in
Europe.
No, yeah.
Yes. Sir, short in Filipino, since magaling kayo managalog, ang sabi ninyo kanina na ginamit nung Vietnam War nung 1960s, 70s ang base militar ng Amerika sa Pilipinas, posible gamitin ulit kung may conflict with North Korea and others, di ba?
Sabi ko nga, hindi natin masasabi sa Amerika kung saan pwedeng gamitin o hindi gamitin ang kanilang mga puwersa dito sa Pilipinas. Kung binigyan natin sila ng base rito, gagamitin na yun kung saan man nila gusto. No? At sa katunayan, hindi nila sasabihin sa atin kung aling mga puwersa, aling mga eroplano o barko ang may nuclear weapons at kung alin ang wala, kasi that's their policy. Back in the 1990s, if I'm not mistaken, or 1980s, New Zealand required the United States to disclose which vessels have nuclear weapons. Sinabi ng New Zealand, kailangan naming alamin yan. America just stopped the military treaty with New Zealand and did not bother going to New Zealand anymore, because they will simply not compromise that. And I can understand why. the moment the vessels that are carrying nuclear weapons are identified, they'll be targeted. Ganun lang yun. So definitely we will never know which vessels carry nuclear arms. And so our policy should be, don't let them in, period. Don't let any of them in. Wag niyo papasukin kasi hindi sasabihin sa'yo kung alin ang merong bomba atomic at alin ang wala.
Just to chime in, Wilson,
Yes,
I think
Professor.
that's I think the most important consideration at the moment. If you look at the 5 EDCA bases right now, and if you look at the debate during the time na yung EDCA na agreement ay dinidebate sa Senado nung panahon na buhay pa ang ating kagalang-galang at ina-admire na si Senator Miriam Santiago, ganun nga ang debate. Hindi nga pwede na i-inspect even ng ating mga officials ang US facilities. So kung wala tayong kakayang i-inspect dyan, hindi natin alam kung anong mga nandyan. Paano kung may mga nuclear weapons na yan, which is not even in congruence with our constitution. So parang may ganong dynamics kasi. So kung may ganong ng lesson tayo, bakit pa kailangan sundan ang pagkakamali na yan ng another pagkakamali, diba? So actually ang challenge for us right now is to ensure na hindi tayo dihado sa lahat ng mga agreements na we are entering into with the United States, especially when you talk about military, na kung saan mayroon kadang tinatawag na accountability. But the problem even is, as mentioned by Secretary Saludo, the United States will not compromise its own policy when you talk about these things. On the other hand, nasa atin yon as a country. Kung gano'n ang policy nila, how are we gonna respond to that? Ibig bang sabihin, i-compromise din natin yung sa ating national security because to agree with their policy? Of course not. That's not the way to go, I think. So yun nga, wag mong hayaan na pumasok yan. Kung halimbawa, wag mo silang hayaan pumasok dito. Kung hindi rin naman nila, bibigyan din ng leeway ang Pilipinas na tignan kung ano yung mga nandyan na mga military assets. Kasi at the end of the day, ganito lang yung kasimple. Whatever happens in the Indo-Pacific region, hindi naman ang US ang apektado dyan kasi ang layo nila, nasa kabilang ibayo sila ng Asia-Pacific. It's us because we are here in Asia. So yun yung dapat nating tignan. Tignan natin kung ano makakabuti sa Pilipinas at hindi lang dahil kailangan natin mag-agree just for the, for other reasons to that. So, mas ganun siguro. I think as a country, we really need to be strategic in the way we think and the way we play our game. Because in many ways, this is a chess game as well. No, it's a game in international arena. So that's my perspective. Thank you.
Wilson.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Laurel.
Can you give me 1 or 2 minutes to read some
Mr.
of the comments from our viewers sa live streaming natin,
yes.
in 3 sites. Just one each siguro, no?
Yes.
Let me just say, sabi ni Russell Arseno, kung ang Ukraine nga na tinutulungan ng NATO at US, ayan, wasak pa rin ang bansang Ukraine. Nagpapatunay lang na hindi kaya ng US at NATO ang Russia. At ganun din ang mangyayari sa bansa natin kung may base ang Amerika sa bansa natin. Another streaming here, let me just see. Si Ian Montaño, sabi, it does not look good if 5 bases, let alone 10 bases be added. RP would be devastated. Why not Washington, D.C.? It's not our interest nor our war. And then from the other blog sa YouTube po, sabi ni Kulaspiro, can we tag PBBM for this so he may know what will the future bring if he pushes to create the alliance with Magog? Magog meaning the United States. Back to you, Winston.
Yes, Professor Celso kindly.
Let me just add, kasi maliban dito sa EDCA, actually there's something happening right under our noses na hindi natin alam eh. Ito yung Coast Watch. Kung narinig niyo na yan, Coast Watch system. Coast Watch was created in the guise of stopping terrorist movement. Andun yung headquarters nila sa headquarters ng Philippine Coast Guard, napakagandang building, puro high-tech yung mga equipment. It used to be run by my friend, si Admiral Joel Garcia, former Coast Guard Commandant. Kita ko yung plano ng Coast Watch. nakita ko kung saan ilalagay yung mga radar facilities, yung mga airfield, saka mga port, naval ports. Nakita ko, it's all over the Philippines. No? Sa Port Barton, the radar facility there is already operational. Sa Glan, South Cotabato, that will be the future Subic. Dinidevelop na rin yan. No? Actually, matagal ng base yan. Kaya nga makita mo yung airport sa Jensan was designed to accommodate C5 Galaxy transport. It was made by the Americans. No? Andito na. Hindi lang natin alam. No? In fact, doon sa Sulusi, ang daming US naval research vessels doon. No? It's already happening right under our noses. Maliban dito sa EDCA, itong Coast Watch in the guise of stopping terrorist movement is actually a subtle militarization of the Philippines.
Country.
Tingnan din yung Coast Watch na yan. Nakita ko yung plano eh. Kita ko kung saan nila gusto maglagay ng mga base. Ang dami.
Thank you, Professor Kainglet.
Wilson,
Yes.
there's a question from Malu Tequilla sa chat.
Yes, I will read the question ni Ms. Malutekia. Thank you. We have a question from Ms. Malutekia. She is columnist of Manila Times, also former president of Universidad de Manila, and she is the founder and CEO of Publicos Asia. Ang question ni Ms. Malutekia for all our guests, do you now see a multipolar dynamics of power where before we just did not want to see them, but the signs were there already? VUCA and pandemic has led to clearer lens. Proof of this multipolarity, the United Kingdom said no to EU. People of other countries are beginning to turn their backs on globalization. COVID-19, how will we stick to our own flags and labels before reaching to others, including the impact of big tech? Question from Ms. Malutekia. Would Secretary Saludo and the others comment?
Certainly the multipolar world is upon us and has been this way for some time. However, this is what's happening because of the United States in its battle in its tensions with Russia and China is actually trying to be the lead country in two regions. It's already doing it in Europe. Alam niyo, yung mga Europeans, they probably are not so happy with these sanctions, as well as the policy of the United States to use the Ukrainian army to hammer Russia. They just want peace and get some recovery going. Pero ang Amerika, dahil gusto nila talagang ihinto ang Russia, kahit na yung mga Europeans, like Germany needs Russian gas. Among other countries, they're having to go along with it. So while it's a multipolar world, in fact, America is able to reassert itself more in Europe. And it will be even more so because Europe is now dependent on American natural gas because they've cut off the Russians. No? Now, going to Asia, anong ginagawa din ng America? Well, it's trying to mobilize Asian countries against China. And of course, it will be the lead country in such an alliance. It already has the quadrilateral alliance with India, Australia, Japan, and now it's really trying to see if ASEAN, starting with the Philippines, would work with it against China to outcompete China. Kaya yung tinanong ng kasama kang Malu, he's a military columnist along with me, talagang it's a multipolar world, but the main power before is reasserting itself in Europe and also mobilizing Asia in competition with China. So the multipolar world, you might say, is under threat. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Saludo. And thank you to Ms. Malutekia.
Let me reply to
Yes, Miss
Oo.
Professor Ana Malindogoy.
Very quick lang. I think yes, the signs of having a multipolar is very obvious. No, you have different centers of powers, and if you look at Asia, China, I think is rising as a major power or the power in Asia at the moment. And if you have Eurasia, though there is a conflict in Ukraine, you can see that Russia is still the regional hegemon in that area. And of course, you have North America and you have the United States in there. However, as what Secretary Saludo have said, the US being the unipolar hegemon during that time is reasserting and trying to preserve its hegemony across the world. So that's why you have the Ukraine crisis at the moment. And now they are trying to, try to influence and try to parang kabig the Asian countries to their side. So that's why they have this regional architecture like Quad and even AUKUS. No, if you don't forget about AUKUS, they're trying. But I think the difference is in this sense is like this. No, in Asia, I think if you look at ASEAN countries, they don't want to make a choice between China and the United States. For ASEAN countries, especially, we want, I think ASEAN countries wants to focus more on economic development and progress, given the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So what they're trying to say is like this. Okay, you are our friend, the United States. China is our friend too. We need China for economic development because we have to acknowledge the fact that China is really at the moment the economic engine of the world. So you have that kind of dynamics, no? And as long I think that countries see it clearly, that any regional conflict in Asia or anywhere in the world is not good for economic development and it's very costly for any country at all. I think that multipolarity dynamics that is emerging at the moment will continue. But of course, the challenges is there because the hegemon United States would want to reassert and maintain its hegemony even in Asia at the moment. So that is the dynamics of the world. But I think what Asian countries, even India is part of Quad. But you look at the behavior of India, it wants to prioritize its supreme national interest. It does not follow every dictates of the United States, even in trying to buy oil or gas for its people.
Russia.
So you have this, You have this kind of dynamics that the bottom line really is economics. Economics at the end of the day. Even the Philippines, I think we should prioritize economics. We should not choose between these two superpowers at the moment, We have good relations with them, friendly relations with them of every front. I think that's the wise thing to do. And Asian countries like Singapore is doing it. Malaysia is doing it. Vietnam, for God's sake, it's doing it. If you look at the dynamics of ASEAN countries, you can see that they recognize there's a multipolarity at the moment. There's two superpowers competing in Asia, but at the end of the day, they prioritize economics. And I think the Philippines should prioritize our economy more than anything because we need it. We need to be a middle income country in a matter of time. No, that's good for our country. That's good for our people, I think. So that's my intervention, I think, in the question on multipolarity. Thank you.
Just to add that,
yes, Professor Salsakang.
In the Association of Southeast Asian Countries, the Philippines is a very peculiar character. Now, number one, because of the colonial mentality of the Filipinos. Number two, because of what I mentioned earlier, that the present administration seems to be gravitating towards America, which actually I was surprised because before the election, I was expecting a more friendly relationship with China. But now it's balancing. But my cue there always are the pronouncement of the DFA secretary. Second, my apprehension with this rising multipolar world is that it might end up in global conflict. Why? Because of the assertion of the United States of America. America is like a dying man, and as a dying person, he will bite and scratch just to maintain his power, and that always end up not good. Yes, the bottom line is economics, but nations go to war also because of economics. America is bankrupt, and because of that, they need to go to war. But the American people should realize that it's only the military-industrial complex that are gaining from all of this, not them. Thank you, Carlos.
But on just to comment on Professor Kainglet, yes, I know. Of course, I mean America will reach for because of its economic decline, no. But even at the end of the day, I think it's in the hands of countries in Asia, especially like the Philippines. What are you gonna do? How are you gonna respond to all this? It's still bottom line. It's still in the hands of the country itself. How are you gonna respond to these challenges, and how your government will respond to it and makes decision. Kasi given na yan eh. America is a given. It's already, you can see it. It's really asserting its hegemony in every possible sense. And it's using military strength. Because it's still the superpower in terms of military. But the question is, that is very relevant to the Philippines at the moment, is how you gonna position yourself as a country? How you gonna respond? What are your policies? And how you gonna play the game that is beneficial to your own country and not, yet you will not lead the country to some destruction. So I think the pressure is there. It's a given. So now the challenge is for the country and the leaders of the country. How you gonna do this prudently, wisely? That is the supreme national interest of the country. Still, is the primordial coordinate.
I think I answered that already.
Considerations.
Take the sign of the
I think
times.
that's my how do you call that? That's my take. But of course, it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge, and we'll see how
Well,
President Marcos will
Yeah.
respond to this. Yeah.
if you want to see how the government will respond, read the sign of the times. Read the pronouncement. Read the direction that the DFA is taking. More or less, you can see already.
Yeah, but take note of
I'm not very happy. I'm not very
President
happy.
Marcos will visit China by January 3 to 6. So probably something happened there. We don't know.
Also, the
Right?
character,
It was announced, no? It was announced, yeah.
Yesterday.
especially the
Thank you.
character,
Yesterday, right? Yeah.
you have to watch that. And I'm not very
Yes,
happy.
that's important. Yes, that's very important.
I'm not very happy with what I'm seeing.
Same
Thank
here,
you.
Professor.
Thank you,
Kainglet. Actually,
Professor.
I'm very worried.
And Professor Kainglet. May follow-up question dito. Follow-up comment si Ms. Malutikia. In answer to the comment of other people, may comment si Mr. Carlos Enrique Saldidos. Sabi ni Carlos Enrique Saldidos, because the US is acting desperately to maintain its declining empire, from the proxy war with Russia in Ukraine to the semiconductors race in Taiwan with China, militarization of key geopolitical corridors under the guise of jihadist oppression, weaponization of financial markets, geostrategic corridors para sabi niya, etc. Ang response ni Ms. Malutikia to the comment ni Ms. Carlos Enrique Salditos, sabi ni Ms. Malutikia, thank you, agree with your position. USA is a declining empire and they just want to reposition themselves through various conflicts.
I agree with Malu, actually.
Yes. And also, there's a comment here from Mr. Al Galang. He said the Philippines can receive fallouts if nuclear warheads hit Western China or Taiwan. Just thinking. Mahaba ang sinabi niya about nuclear warheads. There's also a comment here that based on what Secretary Saludo explained and what Mr. Laurel, Ms. Ana Malindog-Uy, and Professor Kainglet had discussed today, it seems now the Philippines is becoming aircraft carrier of America in the Pacific now. Ocean that's dangerous now.
Wilson.
Yes.
Yeah, may I ask our speakers, our resource persons, a question?
Yes.
Yeah, I think again I will raise this point from the article of Ado Paglinawan at the CAJ, Asian Century Journal, no, ACJ, about the 5-year term of the agreement of the EDCA, which is up for review and
Next year daw.
decision in, I mentioned it earlier, no? Was it April of 2023?
Early next year daw.
Yeah,
Yes.
April 2023. Now, what can we do given the consensus among all the comments streaming and so on, including the complaint of some of the people here who are trying to pass on the discussion to the PBBM loyalists to websites, they're being stopped, they're being erased, and
Oh,
so on.
wow.
But the question I think that is crucial now, given the consensus of almost 95% of the reactions here and reactors, is that the bases are bad. So not only the 5 additional bases, but the 5 bases that are existing today should end by April 2023. And I think it's very clear based on the debates in the Supreme Court and the comment of Justice Puno before, 7 years ago. This is illegal. That was a politically influenced decision by the Supreme Court at that time. Now is the time to reverse this. What can we, the people, do? So let's ask
Yes,
Ginoong
Patrice.
Saludo,
Patrice.
Miss Madam Ana Malinduguy, and Celso Kainglet.
Yes, what can the people do, and your stand on this?
Yeah, I in my column on warning against the EDCA and those bases, I urged President Marcos to call a National Security Council meeting, the full council.
Yes.
The full council includes the former presidents who are alive, so that would be Gloria Arroyo and President Duterte. And you will know that these two presidents, they are not pro-US. You know, they have tried to keep the Philippines neutral. Of course, we know Duterte's policy, and the same thing with Arroyo. She's honorary chairman of the Association of Philippine-China Understanding. So I think that would be good. The other thing is it would bring in the leaders of Congress, who, of course, we just heard earlier, quoted very well to start this forum, quoted very well on their views about EDCA, that it's unconstitutional. So get them into that forum. So I think that forum can come to a sound decision. Should moving forward, first and foremost, which is what Wilson is doing here already, dapat ipaalam sa taong bayan itong nangyayaring ito. Kasi hindi alam ng tao. Sana yung mga OFW natin nakikinig dito ngayon. No?
Yes.
At sabihin nila kasi, naku, malaking ligalig ito at pinsala sa bansa kung ito'y matutuloy. No? At ewan ko kung pabor dito si Presidente Marcos, pero ang maliwanag na gumagalaw ay si Secretary Manalo, si incoming Secretary Faustino, at saka ang ating embahador sa Amerika na si Babes Romualdez. Ngayon, hawa ng Diyos, meron na tayong embahador sa China na napakagaling din, katumbas nung yumaong embahador Chito Santa Romana, si Jaime Flor Cruz. He will bring the same kind of deep knowledge in China that Chito Santa Romana did, and he will be able to hopefully present a view that would help balance the pro-American slant of some of our leaders. And I also call on National Security Advisor Clarita Carlos. She was the one who said we should have an independent foreign and defense policy. You can't do that with foreign bases. You cannot have an independent foreign and defense policy. If you have foreign bases, you will end up following the foreign and defense policy of that power that you have hosted. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Maraming salamat. Thank you, Professor. Yes.
I agree with Secretary Saludo, no? I mean, like, call that security. Kasi nung panahon ni President Digong ata, kinukol niya yung National Security Council ng mga presidente nandun. Tsaka, of course, other concerned officials ng bansa, pinag-uusapan nila kapag may mga very critical na mga issues, major issues na may kinalaman sa geopolitics or international relation na kailangan ng presidente ng advice or, wisdom. Actually, it's wisdom, actually. Kasi itong mga former president, medyo mas matanda na rin, no? At mas may wisdom na sila at mas malaki din ang kanilang experience pagdating, at may experience sila, of course, being presidents, no? Before. So I think that is one important thing. And I agree also, diba? Kung gusto mo ng independent foreign policy and defense policy, then you probably really try not to, accommodate this kind of lobbying from the United States, more EDCA bases and all of these things. Kasi wala tayong control dyan. And the US will not bend for us na i-control natin ang bases nila dito sa Pilipinas. I don't think that will happen. On the other side, I think the most important for the people, especially kasi at the end of the day, we should not forget, the Philippines is a democracy. It's a representative democracy. Ibig sabihin, yung mga leaders natin, binoto natin to represent our sentiments as a people. And nandun sila para i-represent ang anong gusto natin, anong interest natin bilang mga Pilipino. So I think the Filipino people should try to get involved in the discourse, in the debate on these issues, and probably yung mga tulad ni Wilson, magkaroon pa ng mas maraming mga public discourse and mga media forum like this to educate as well our kababayans na maintindihan nila yung issue. Kasi itong mga issues na to, hindi rin to madali mahirap din siya, very complicated din So kailangan siguro more education, more enlightenment sa ating mga kababayan, public discourse, public debate, and everyone should partake. Kasi lahat tayo po, kapag whatever happens, magkamali ang ating mga leaders sa pagpapasya sa mga issues na to, lahat tayo damay dito. Isang boat lang po ang Pilipinas. We are in one boat. Everything na mangyayari sa boat yan, lahat po tayo ay apektado. So, yun ang aking panawagan. At sana po ay makinig din po ang ating mahal na Pangulo sa mga public discourse na nangyayari tulad nito ngayon na Pandesal Forum ni Mr. Wilson Flores. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ana Malindog. May comment dito, question. I said, Professor Kainglet, yes.
Two things. Number
yes.
one, aside from uniting with persons of goodwill in this country, we should unite also with persons of goodwill in the United States. We want to stop spending, and other countries as well. Number two, I want to tickle the churches. Kasi during nandito pang Subic, kasama kasi ng base militar ay ang prostitusyon. Medyo mababaw medyo mababaw na motivasyon, pero it will tickle their moralist stand. And churches and churches will create noises and exert pressure.
Moral suasion, tama.
So dapat mga simbahan, papasok mga base, kasama niyan prostitusyon. Kumilos na kayo.
Oo nga.
Yung mga movement.
Mga good idea yan, multi-sectoral. Thank you,
Wilson,
Professor Kainglet.
Wilson, 1 minute intervention. Yes. We will have a second forum on this subject matter with General Victor Corpus.
Yes.
Okay,
we'll schedule it next week.
And an American guest that I am arranging now, the anti-war and anti-US imperialism. So expect that. So that's it. That's my...
Isa pa. Just in case I forget pala. Tomorrow 10 a.m. if you are all free, the former Senate President of Indonesia with several legislators are visiting Kamuning Bakery 10 a.m. for a Pandesal Forum about ASEAN geopolitics and economy. Baka we could ask their opinions also tomorrow 10 a.m. May sinabi dito si Mr. Carlos Enrique Fernandez Saldito, sabi niya, about all these worries about the new EDCA bases being a threat. Sabi pa niya, ang kapitbahay natin na Taiwan Island, a hostile Taiwan is like a dagger on China's throat. Kaya the Philippines daw, pag naging ganyan din, baka we are seen as a threat by our friend and neighbor. Sinabi niya, and other comments. There's a question here. There's another question here for our speakers. Do you think si President Bongbong Marcos will be, na-mention kanina ni, somebody mentioned, si Secretary Saludo ba or si Professor Kainglet, na I think Professor Kainglet nag-mention na baka concern ng new government a threat of removing him politically. Is that a concern? May na-mention kanina Somebody asked will that be a factor sa decision ng gobyerno natin ngayon whether to renew or not renew EDCA? Kasi in other countries, pag nag-no ka sa US military presence or intervention, baka you will be the one removed, not the bases.
Yes. And there's a very...
Can you comment? on this,
There's
Professor? Again.
Yes, there's a very interesting book by John Perkins, no? The Confession of an Economic Hitman.
Yes.
Every
Naging
time
video
there's
yun.
a newly elected leader of a country, the economic hitman will approach, and if he says no, it's either he dies or he's removed through coup d'etat. And it's
Wilson,
Yes, Secretary Saludo.
continue, Cesar.
Yes. Professor Kanglet.
Celso, continue.
I'm okay. I'm finished.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, just on the point about whether the president can be removed. Palagi ko hindi po mangyayari yun kasi ang mandato niya napakalaki. No?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, political strength.
I mean, hindi mo titinag yan, no?
Yes.
At saka, pangalawang bagay, yung mga Amerikano, kung isipin na tatagalin, sino papalit? Yung anak ni Duterte.
Ay, oo nga. Tama kayo.
Parang mali yata yun.
Good reminder.
Kung gusto nilang mapalapit sa Pilipinas, hindi nila papalitan si Marcos ng anak ni Duterte. No?
Tama kayo. Thank you.
Pangalawa, if I may just talk specifically on the threat to the Philippines of a war. No?
Yes.
Nabanggit ko na natin yung mga base na pwedeng atakihin. Ngayon,
Yes.
itong mga baseng ito, kasi pag nagkaroon ng gera, ang China, siyempre may mga armas yan. Ngayon, ang pag-iisipan ngayon ng People's Liberation Army, aatakihin ba namin itong mga base gamit ang conventional missiles? So, ang kailangan mo dyan, maraming missiles. No?
Yes.
Tapos, pagka-atake mo, pwede pa rin niyang ayusin. Pwedeng kumpunihin para magamit ulit, aatakihin mo ulit. Ganun ang conventional weapons. Pero kung gamitin mo ay nuclear missile, isang missile lang yan, wala
Yes.
na. At hindi pwedeng ayusin kasi radioactive.
Oo.
So, the adversary will think, will I use many missiles repeatedly to neutralize those bases, or will I use a few missiles with nuclear warheads? Now what will make China hesitate nuclear warheads is because their own facilities could then be targeted in retaliation. Using that would give them pause. But then they have strong anti-missile defenses for that sort of thing. So they may decide, we can defend our bases. You have no defense. If I nuke your bases, I'll nuke them. So that is one. Second thing, the EDCA treaty also involves massive inflow rotations of U.S. forces in the Philippines. They will be sailing through our waters. No? Now, I don't want to say that this is intentional, but in effect, the U.S. forces will have human shields. What do I mean? It is harder to target naval vessels in an archipelago, especially if you're trying to avoid collateral damage, than it is to target them in the open sea. Kung ang mga puwersa ng Amerika ay nasa dagat Pasipiko, mas madaling atakihin yun kesa kung nagtatago sila sa mga dagat-dagatan natin. Pero ang China, pag gera, gera. Ibig sabihin, kung kailangan nilang atakihin yung mga barko ng Amerika na nandun sa pagitan ng ating mga isla, gagawin nila. At malas na lang ng mga Pilipino. And by the way, the whole world will then blame us for being stupid enough to let those vessels be there. Alam mo, magkakagera, pinapasok mo dyan, natamaan kayo ng mga sa labanan. Sino may kasalanan?
Wala pang renta, Secretary Saludo.
Really?
Wala
this is bad all around. This is really bad all around. I don't even... And when the EDCA treaty was, I've written on the EDCA treaty, and I called it an act of treason. An act of treason. It was a betrayal of the country by the people who put it together. Basically, unfortunately, I'll have to mention him, the late President Aquino, and the people who negotiated this treaty. We should never have gotten into this. Ngayon, ito pinapatupad naman. I mean, that's even worse, unfortunately. Those who signed the agreement, it's bad enough. But now there are some people trying to implement it. And this will be terrible for our country if there is a war, and there could be a war. Now, one last thing about the chances
Yes.
for a war. Okay, and again, the strategists will understand this.
Yes.
In Ukraine, there was, Putin didn't want to invade. Why did he invade?
Yes.
Because Zelensky said he will join NATO and the European Union, and he will double his armed forces. In short, Putin was faced with the prospect of massive militarization, arms buildup next door. What did he do? Well, as expected, he invaded, because he is not going to wait until those forces of NATO and Ukraine have expanded. Why? Why will he wait? He's not going to wait. He'll come in. Now, transfer that to Asia. If we allow US forces to set up in our country, then China will be faced with the question, do I take Taiwan now when those forces are not yet there in the Philippines, or do I wait until those forces are fully set up? I mean, this is a no-brainer.
Yes.
It's a
That's a
no-brainer. I
very
mean, am I going to wait
provoking.
until the US has fully armed in the Philippines?
Yes.
I'm not going to wait.
Of course.
Putin did not wait. So my point is, EDCA implementation can trigger war over Taiwan, precisely because armies will not wait until you are fully armed before they move.
Very
That's
thought-provoking. Very thought-provoking. Very true, huh?
I agree with the Secretary Saludo, no, when you talk about this kind of war games, or
Escalating. Yes.
Yeah, it of course a country will not wait for a threat to be bigger before he respond, no? Kasi
Yes,
we need always to remember, no, that a country would always protect, a state will always protect its national security and national interests above all else. At ganon din yan for China. Ganon din yung dapat tayo din, ganon. So, kailangan natin talagang isipin mabuti kung papayagan mo ba itong mga 5 additional bases na yun? Ay, may 5 additional bases ka nga dyan na medyo unconstitutional na nga, magdagdag ka pa. Parang na yan, ha? Parang hindi na okay yung ganyan. Tsaka pagdating naman dun sa issue na baka ma-regime change si Pangulong Bongbong Marcos, I don't think so. 32 million is 32 million. He's a majority president. Look at what happened to President Duterte. Ilang beses ba nagkaroon ng mga plots against President Digong? Diba, ang dami, halos every day may attack against him. Every single day may plot against his presidency, pero ano nangyari? Wala. Digong finished his term with flying colors. Bakit? At the end of the day, he has the support of the Filipino, and he had the support of the Filipino people. So at the end of the day, it's the Filipino people that matters at the end of the day. Hindi yung ibang mga considerations, I think,
May tanong dito na this issue of 5 additional EDCA bases being requested by USA, coincidence daw ba na in recent weeks and months, may biglang lumalabas na news all over media na bigla daw may satellite photo daw from the US of China military facilities in the island. Biglang yung mga news na ganyan, is all this part of a plan to condition the public opinion na kailangan natin ng security guard daw. Yung parang yun ang, di ba, yun ang slant nila.
Let me note, Wilson. The source of these photographs, the source of these reports, and I'm not disparaging them, but the source of this report is called the Asian Maritime Transparency Initiative. It is a unit of the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Yan po ay nasa ilalim ng CSIS, which is of course, a security and foreign affairs think tank serving the interests of the United States. So mag-iingat lang tayo dyan kasi maaring gumawa yan ng mga impormasyon, ganyan, ng retrato, ganyan, na pwede nating pag-aralan, pero I will always verify what they say. I will need to validate it kasi unfortunately that AMTI and the CSIS are American institutions that will first and foremost advance American interests.
Salamat, thank you. pareho yan doon na nangyari noon yun. Mayroon daw parang ship daw ng China sa tabi daw ng dagat, puro basura daw. Pero lumabas, hindi pala, fake news pala na galing sa Amerika, na ano pala yun, sa Australia pala ginawa yun, hindi pala, not even in our sea, di ba?
Yung nagkakalat daw ng dumi. That's parang nasa isang forum ata yon na prinisend.
Yes.
Tapos naging malaking issue sa Pilipinas kasi na-broadcast.
All over the news.
Pero nung
nagalit.
verify yung info, mali yung info.
Wilson,
Yes, Professor Kainglet.
two things,
Professor
no?
Celso Kainglet.
Number one, take note, era pa sa majority president.
Yes.
No?
Popular.
He may not necessarily remove BBM, but pressures can be exerted in so many ways, no? Threaten the family, etc. Number two, if you read the book of Bobby Tiglao, Debacle, no?
Yes.
Bobby Tiglao exposed the modus of the Rosario that they will create a threat, perceived threat,
Yes.
to scare the Filipino people, to justify EDCA, etc. Take note, EDCA was signed during the time of Waltz Gasmin, during the time of Aquino. So that's their modus. They will create a perceived threat in order to justify their actions.
That's a very good caution. Very good warning. Thank you,
Wilson, point of information lang. Yung nire-refer mo na incident, supposed incident ng dropping of excrement sa Philippine sea areas.
It came out all over the media.
That is from Simularity, an US NGO. And this was released by CEO of Simularity, Liz Dare, during a think tank forum hosted by Strat-based ADR Institute of Albert Del Rosario. So, huling-huli sila spreading fake news.
So we should be careful about this. Baka I expect some people message here, some media people, baka there will be more intensification of this media false news or wrong information na ili-leak to the media to condition the public opinion daw. Thank you to all your warnings and information.
Well, I think Secretary Saludo, please.
Very quickly, that really underscores the role of the media. Dapat hindi sila basta magpadala sa mga paputok na ganyan ng mga propagandista. This is propaganda. So you should be aware, of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Secretary Saludo. I mean, the media, I think, should be more responsible. And I think also the Filipino people should double-check information. Kasi ang daming dumalabas sa internet, social media. Pero syempre, nasa harap natin yan, nakikita natin. Pero siguro as responsible citizen, magdo-double-check tayo ng information, a little of effort, para alam natin kung totoo or fake news nga naman to. And then, if nakita natin na hindi naman pala totoo, probably inform our kababayans na, sandali, mali po yung information. So parang gano'n na rin. It's part of our responsibility as citizen of the country, I think.
Thank you.
I will also add that Western media is, of course, pro-Western. Don't ever think that they will be objective, because the main audience that they serve are Western nations. So if they suddenly take a line favorable to Russia, for instance, their viewers and readers in the West will hate them for it. So they're careful. And the same thing, if they come out with something that's pro-China, they're not gonna like, their own main audience, what pays their salaries and bills, will not like it. So just be wary. Western media is pro-Western, so you might want to check other media, such as Asian media, as well as Al Jazeera, which is has its own view, but presumably is not very Western. And I would also check Russian media and Chinese media. They have their own perspective, and you just have to be able to balance all of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Saludo and the other professors. There's another question here. You mentioned earlier na these threats of yung first island chain and all that. It reminds me na a few months ago, Professor Walden Bello was here talking about geopolitics. somebody asked a question, a foreign media, about the China and US conflict. He said something very, very thought-provoking. He said, the South China Sea daw is actually like an American lake. Kasi ang dami daw bases, pinapaliguran daw ang China. Can you confirm that? There are many bases now surrounding China, like the way Russia feels it is being surrounded by NATO. It is,
well,
ano ba?
that might have been so during when they had the US bases here in the Philippines.
Yes.
But the only bases now that are used by the United States is in Korea, which is mainly to defend Korea from the north, and Japan, which is mainly to defend Japan, which is why the United States wants to have bases again in the Philippines, because even Korea and Japan bases are too far away. No?
Yes.
And the closest thing they have is Guam, which to them is it's
so
still
far
too
from
far.
Taiwan.
Now you have to ask the question: why do they want 10 bases in the Philippines? Why 10?
Yes,
well,
why?
And unfortunately, again, I'm not saying this is a strategy, but if you have 10 bases, it's harder for China to knock them all out.
Yes.
So the more bases, the better it is for America. But for us, it is worse. Why? Because 10 places in the Philippines will be hit. I mean, talaga. Now, is this supposed to be our ally? Is this supposed to be an ally of the Philippines? Ipapahamak tayo ng ganon? Gosh. I mean, ano ba to?
Magandang analysis. And there's another question here. Kanina sinabi ninyo ho, na we should be non-aligned and neutral and have independent foreign policy. Somebody asked here, are these countries the closest allies of America before are now moving towards non-alignment or at least neutral in terms of this? Germany, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. Kasi Germany, the German leader just visited, pumunta sa Beijing kahit ayaw ng US. Saudi Arabia, number one ally of the US in the Middle East Arab countries. Number one oil supplier, hindi na nakikinig daw entirely 100% sa US. And even Israel, the number one best friend of USA in the whole world, has good ties with China. Very good economic and strategic ties. What are your views now? Can we be similar as the Philippines? May hope ba tayo na maging ganyan? Good friend of America pero hindi kaaway ang China. Hindi perceived as threat daw.
Well, that's the direction we should go. Now, the best way to do that is ASEAN. ASEAN should be strengthened, and we should, if we're considering, because we really need allies too. Our forces are not that strong, and we could be subjected to naval blockade. These are difficult to manage purely on our own. So plus, if there is a full-scale invasion, we can fight it off to some extent, but we'll still need foreign allies. And here, I will just suggest that we build up an alliance with our ASEAN neighbors, particularly Indonesia. And that's why I'm interested in that forum you have tomorrow. Indonesia is a very good ally for us because it is a naval and air power for the simple reason that it's an archipelago, and it has particular advantages vis-a-vis China. It controls the straits between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. And so it can actually blockade oil shipments going through those waters. Now, I don't think it will do that. It will try to, but you see, if it's our ally, here's the way alliances work. They don't actually have to defend you completely with their forces. The main thing about allies is that if we have an alliance with certain countries, like Indonesia and ASEAN, China will be careful of or any adversary will be careful of having a war with us, because it will draw in countries that it doesn't want to have a conflict with. Now, our ally is the United States. What does China think of conflict with the United States? Well, it doesn't want it, but it's willing to do it. It is. It will not flinch from it. That doesn't apply to other countries. If we have an alliance with Indonesia, China will be careful about displeasing Indonesia by hurting one of its allies. And I think Indonesia would want, I'm hoping, would want to
Yes.
ally with us because it strengthens ASEAN. ASEAN should really be coming together, not just as an economic grouping, but a security and geopolitical grouping. That hopefully is what ASEAN centrality means. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Secretary,
Just
I want to
quick-
add to what you said. Sorry, you said Indonesia. Secretary Teddy Boy Locsin, before he became DFA Secretary, he would come to Kamuning Bakery and he would tell the story daw when he was young daw, President Marcos daw called up his father, wala pang martial law, and called his father to go to Malacanang to a meeting daw. And then asked the son, Teddy Boy Locsin, to accompany him. So when they went to Malacanang daw, he said, sabi ni Teddy Boy Locsin, he saw President Marcos there with the military leaders of the Philippines, plus the chief of staff of the Indonesian Armed Forces down there. They were planning daw to take Sabah. Sabi niya, they had a plan down there na somebody aborted it lang, di ba? Something, it's a long story. Kwento ni Teddy Boy Locsin, he was a witness now. He was there now with his father, and President Marcos was there now with the Indonesian military chief now. Just one anecdote lang. That was sabi ni Teddy Boy Locsin at Kamuning Bakery. During a dinner na casual lang, kunikwento niya. Yes. You were saying something, Professor Ana Malindogoy, sorry.
It's okay. What I'm saying is like pagdating dyan sa tulad ng mga movements ng Saudi Arabia, Germany. Actually, Germany went to Beijing last week, no? And then
Yes, with a big business delegation.
Yeah. Actually, but I think they are more on economic. So they're trying to have that good economic relation with Germany, given the crisis in Europe at the moment. And if you look at Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia is the closest ally of the United States in the Middle East. But look at how the Saudi Arabia is, trying to navigate the whole geopolitical dynamics of the world. It's trying to a little bit, turn
of Russia and China.
Yeah, and even Israel trying to have a good relation with China. And if you look at ASEAN countries, look at Singapore, look at Vietnam, even Indonesia. Indonesia has a very good relation with China. China is building the biggest, I think, railway or subway,
the high-speed
train, I think, in Indonesia. Yeah, and it has a lot of investment in China. Has a lot of infrastructure investment in Indonesia, and it's ongoing at the moment. So you can see ASEAN. We as a country, we should support ASEAN and we should promote ASEAN centrality. And we should be more close to our neighbors because that is our comfort zone, I think. So ASEAN centrality not only in economics, but even in geopolitics and security dynamics in the region. And if you look at ASEAN and China, it has a very good relationship. Look at ASEAN countries and how it relates with China. I think from there we can see and we can learn from other ASEAN countries how they position themselves in all of these things. And if you look at Singapore and even Vietnam, they have good relation with the US. They also have a very good relation, and they benefit actually from economic dividends of China's economic rise as a superpower in the economic side. So I think we should learn from this, and not really copy, but learn and try to put it in our context, and try to navigate the whole dynamics at the moment. Like Indonesia has that large speed train. I think it's so huge.
Yes. It will be open now next year.
Yes, it's a very fast because I've looked at the construction and look deeper on what is going on in there. It's very fast. And look at Laos. They already have that speed train, and it was funded by China. Yeah, Laos, and even
all the way to Singapore down.
Oo nga the connect nila yung mainland Southeast Asia going to Burma or Myanmar, So you can see, you can travel now from Laos going to Myanmar just by land. Before it's not happening, but now it happens. It's China project. So we need to learn from the experience of other ASEAN countries and try to also, wag tayong pahuli. Kumuha din tayo ng mga economic possible na benefits sa ating relationship with China, diba?
Thank you very much. We have no more time na. Sorry, it's 12 o'clock. Can I request our distinguished speakers to wrap up with closing statement? We will request Secretary Saludo for last we ladies first siguro will request Professor Ana Malindog Uy muna closing statement, and then Celso Cainglet, Professor, and then later on, last but not the least, si Secretary Saludo, kasi it's 12 o'clock now, reminder sa akin ng tao. We are very fortunate to have you talk about this, and we should have second session and third session na educational about this. Professor Ana Malindog Uy, can you give your closing statement about this very urgent, important issue that we should all talk about and learn about?
Thank you so much, Wilson, and thank you for organizing this Pandesal Forum. Thank you so much to Secretary Saludo for gracing the occasion. It's really an important issue, and thank you for giving us your perspective and sharing with us so many literature, just telling us na it's very bothersome and worrisome to have additional EDCA bases in the country and expand more the military assets and boots on the ground of the Americans in our country. It's really I think this is a concern that the current government should look at and probably try to dissect and try to be more prudent, especially in making decisions. And at the end of the day, I still believe that the architect, the sole architect of our foreign policy is the president. Though we can see that the movement of the DFA secretary and the OIC of the defense secretary, OIC defense secretary at the moment, and even Big Romualdez, the ambassador to the United States, are having this kind of statement and proclamations that the Philippines is more aligned to the United States than other countries at the moment. I still believe that at the end of the day, it's the president who makes decision, and the president should be the primary consideration on all of these things. And I hope the president will listen to voices like the voices of Secretary Rick Saludo, and who's writing in Manila Times that he needs to think over and be more prudent and put the country in a better position, not only this time, but in the future. We need to look at the future as well, not only now. So I think for the next generation of Filipinos, and I think regionally speaking, the Philippines, again, as I've said in my opening statement, the Philippines should continue to assert ASEAN centrality, which means unity and solidarity with neighboring countries in Southeast Asia. It should continue to forge, of course, good relation with Asian countries. It should not forget that it has, of course, to have good relation with China, especially in the economic front, and also with the United States. We have a long history as well with the United States, and it should continue as well to pursue good relation with middle power, because middle powers are important, especially when you talk about decision making or power dynamics in Asia and even the world, like Japan, Brazil, India. And at the end of the day, I think the Filipino people should support the government, especially in trying to position the country in a better situation. We need to always remember na ang Pilipinas ay geostrategically important to all powers in Asia. So kailangan natin i-leverage to na hindi ito mapunta sa ating destruction but to our, progress as a country. At the end of the day, also we need to tackle and we need to focus on our economy. Economy is important. Kahit ano pang gawin natin sa military, kung walang kakainin ng ating mga kababayan, wala pong mangyayari. Kailangan siguro ang gobyerno natin ay tignan din kung paano i-upgrade at lalo pang pagandahin ang ating ekonomiya, kasi yun po ay malapit sa tiyan ng mga Pilipino. Maraming salamat at magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Ana Malindog Uy. Next, we'd like to invite for closing statement Professor Celso Cainglet, right now in Iloilo.
Thank you very much, Wilson. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm very, very honored to be a reactor to my brilliant former boss, Rick Saludo, whom I idolize. As a student of philosophy, I belong to the Frankfurt School. And as you know, the Frankfurt School is considered as the grandchild of Sigmund Freud. And they applied Freud's psychoanalytic theory in their social analysis. Freud believed that the psychosis of a person is due to the suppressed or latent meaning, so you have to surface it, you have to let it out. The Frankfurt School believes that if you expose the hidden interests, especially the sinister hidden interests of a particular group, it will lose steam. So that's why I believe forums like this are very, very important, and we should have more forums like this to expose the sinister intentions of the Americans, and hopefully it will lose steam. Thank you very much, Wilson.
Thank you very much, Professor Celso Cangilet, for another perspective and very good closing statement. Last but not the least, the very eloquent Secretary Ricardo Saludo na, by the way, anak siya ng very good business leader, former PCCI President Noemi Lirag Saludo. Magaling na business leader, kaya matalino itong si former Secretary Saludo. Yeah, for your closing statement, sir.
Yeah, salamat, Wilson. And again, thank you for organizing this forum. It is a forum that is important really for our peace and security. Pagka napahamak ang bansa, this could be one major source. Now, my final statement really is not about our topic itself. You know, one of my work in the Manila Times is not just the geopolitics. I also write a religious column.
Yes, I
Thursday.
noticed. You wrote about the
I write a religious column. Yes. Now, what I enjoin our countrymen, ang panawagan po natin sa mga kababayan, kailangan po tayong magdasal.
Yes.
Kasi kahit ano pang mangyari din sa mga base militar na ito, mukhang ang ating rehiyon ay tumitindi ang girian at maaaring magkagera. At sa Europa, kung magkaroon nga doon ng gera na mas malaki, patay tayo rito sa ekonomiya. No? So we have to pray. We have to pray. Bahala kayo kung sino, paano yung pagdasal. Sa akin, Rosario. No? And I will make a plug for one particular prayer event that is specifically for the country and our security. On November 26 and 27, in the Palawan, facing the West Philippine Sea, we are staging a Eucharistic and Marian prayers event specifically for peace and security in the country. And thankfully, we are very thankful for the Bishop Florencio of the Military Ordinariate of the Philippines, as well as our uniformed services, the armed forces, the police, that they are joining us in this prayer. No? Kasi tayo po, maliit na bansa lang tayo. No? But with God protecting us, in the same way that God protected Portugal when it was consecrated to the Immaculate Heart, it was protected from World War II. Tayo po, we need the Lord's prayer. We need the Lord's protection. Manawagan po tayo sa Kanya para sa ating kaligtasan, kapayapaan, at kasarinlan din. We can be independent with God's help. Thank you very much. Yun lang po. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Saludo. Before you leave, may tanong dito pala, may nagsabi, may nagsuggest, can Secretary Ricardo Saludo please compile his columns about the EDCA dangers into a booklet or a book para easier to disseminate? Some people would like to suggest that now. Would you consider that urgently?
Well, we can do that, but at the same time, I will just suggest that you also, if you can go to the Manila Times and they have a compendium of columns of all the columnists,
online,
no? And I have posted already in the chat. I've reposted all the links to to the material I used today. And the last thing I will post now, it's right there, are the links to all my columns. So if you click on that link, you will go back over. Yeah, you will see all my recent columns. So you just go over them. The headlines are there, so you'll know what topic is being discussed. Yan po as a start, and then we will move towards putting something. Yeah, we will be putting something together and in particular, we will put something in Filipino.
Yes.
Isasalin po natin itong mga column na to sa Filipino para malaman po ng nakararami nating kababayan. Thank you.
Para maintindihan natin lahat ano ang tinatawag na independent foreign policy. Yun totoo. Thank you once again. Thank you once again.
Salamat sa iyo. Salamat.
Thank you once again to the very distinguished speakers natin, former Secretary Ricardo Saludo, who writes very well, and akala ko marami na akong alam. Every time I read you and listen to you, parang marami ako natututunan. It's not true that we know everything, that we have read everything. After listening to Secretary Saludo and the other speakers also, thank you to Mr. Herman Laurel, who had to leave earlier for a lunch meeting. Thank you to Professor Ana Malindog-Uy for enlightening us on the foreign policy aspect of it. And Professor Celso Cainglet very eloquently also giving us different fresh perspectives. May suggestion din siya na we appeal to the American public opinion and for the peace-loving American people who will help stop this military build-up. And one of the suggestions of many of the listeners, sabi nila, we should focus sana hopefully daw on economic partnership with China and USA. Not daw always every time the American officials come to the Philippines, to Manila, always pinag-uusapan military bases, selling of arms, buying of guns. Why not focus daw on economy when talking to China, Russia, and USA? Why always now arms and military talk now? Yun. Thank you to everyone for joining Pandesal Forum here at Kamuning Bakery Cafe. Thank you very much. We should have a part 2 of this now. Ang dami nagtanong. And the recording we will share to everyone. We will have a video. Yes.
May part 2 daw, Wilson, sabi ni Herman Laurel. Si General Victor Corpus naman ang
galing yan.
Yes. Thank you.
So next week ata yan. Mas ano siya, siguro mas ano na yon, mas military talaga.
Yes, he's another nationalist like Secretary
nationalist
Saludo,
person.
like Ana Malindog-Uy, like Mr. Laurel, like Professor Celso Cainglet.
Oo, sige. See you mga kababayan next week.
Salamat sa inyo. Salamat.
Maraming salamat to everyone.
Secretary Saludo.
Yung libro daw ninyo, Secretary Saludo, you don't have to make it very thick. Kahit
No. Just focus on the key issues.
Suggestion nila. Maganda yan, ho. We could volunteer to assist. Ay, picture daw tayo. Can we have a picture? Pwede ba
picture daw, picture.
Picture.
Yes. Who will do it, the picture? Pwede ba makita tayo lahat? Larissa and si Joshua, can we have a nice photo of everyone?
Recording stopped.
Photo, please. And to the media friends, I will send you pandesal. Secretary Saludo, pakitext and address ninyo.
Yeah, oo.
Yes. Picture daw tayo.
3, 2,
Wilson,
Okay, thank you.
Wilson,
Thank you.
mahal na ba ang pandesal mo? Nag-increase ka na ba ng presyo?
Nag-increase kami konti, pero alam mo, unfortunately, hindi lang kami, lahat ng libo-libong panaderya sa Pilipinas cannot increase 100% like sugar. Sugar 100%. Okay. And others, incremental lang, konti-konti.
Nag-increase din sa inflation, no? May inflation kasi.
Papadala namin sa inyo. Tapos regards to your mother, Miss Secretary Saludo.
Yes,
I
thank
don't know
you.
if she will remember me. I met
Oh,
her
she
only
does. Yeah.
only.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Magaling. Thank you to everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
afternoon.